Welcome to the Nameless.
I remember her checking my vitals every hour. I remember her telling me I'd be okay. But in the morning, they told me no one like her works there. I'd gone in for something routine. At least that's what everyone kept calling it. Routine. Standard. In and out. Minor abdominal surgery. Nothing dramatic. I signed the forms, joked with the anesthesiologist, texted my sister a thumbs-up selfie in the hospital gown. The whole thing felt boringly normal. The hospital itself wasn't small, but it wasn't huge either. Clean, beige walls, soft lighting, that faint antiseptic smell that clings to everything. Before they wheeled me back, a nurse adjusted my IV and asked if I was nervous. "Just a little," I said. She smiled politely and said, "You'll be fine." She wasn't the one. The surgery went well. That's what they told me. I woke up groggy, throat dry, body heavy but manageable. There was pain, sure, a dull internal ache, but it felt controlled, contained.
They moved me to a private recovery room overnight for observation. Just standard monitoring. My vitals had dipped slightly during anesthesia, so they wanted to be cautious. I remember the room clearly. One window, 4th floor. A view of the parking structure across the street. A clock above the door. It ticked softly. Too softly. Almost polite. The first time she came in, it was around 10 p.m. I hadn't been asleep, just drifting. She moved quietly. No squeak from her shoes, no rustle from her scrubs. She checked the monitor beside my bed and adjusted something on the IV stand. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was calm, flat but not cold. "Yeah," I whispered. "Pain level?" 4, maybe 5. She nodded and wrote something down on a small notepad. Not a tablet, not one of those rolling computer stations every other nurse used. A small paper pad. I remember that detail because it felt outdated. She adjusted my blanket, tucked it in gently around my legs. "You'll be okay," she said. It was such a simple sentence, but she held eye contact just a little longer than necessary. I fell asleep after that. I woke again at 11:07 p.m. I know the exact time because I stared at the clock for a while. The ticking was louder then. She was already in the room, standing by the window, just looking out. The blinds were half open, but there wasn't much to see except the dim glow of the parking structure lights. "I didn't hear you come in," I said. She didn't turn around immediately. Then she did. "You were sleeping." She stepped back toward the bed and checked the monitor again. Heart rate, oxygen, blood pressure cuff. Everything normal. "You're stable," she said. "That's good." She adjusted my IV again. Her hands were cool. Not cold, just cool. "What's your name?" I asked. There was the smallest pause. "Marin," she said. Not Mary, not Megan. Marin. I repeated it in my head so I wouldn't forget. She made a small mark on her notepad again. I drifted off. Midnight. That's when things started feeling slightly wrong. Nothing dramatic, just wrong. I woke because the room felt brighter. The overhead lights weren't on, but there was a soft glow, warmer than before. Marin was sitting in the chair in the corner, not scrolling on a phone, not reading, just sitting, watching the monitor. "You don't have to stay in here," I said, my voice thick with sleep. "I know," she replied. Silence stretched. The clock ticked. I noticed something then. She wasn't wearing a name badge. Every nurse I'd seen before surgery had one clipped to their chest, plastic with a barcode and a photo. She didn't. I told myself maybe it was flipped around or tucked in.
"Are you covering this floor alone?" I asked. "No," she said. Another pause. "But it's quiet tonight." Her answers were always just enough, never more. She stood up and came to my bedside, checked my pulse manually this time, fingers against my wrist. Her touch lingered. "You're healing," she said softly.
That's important. I remember thinking that was a strange way to phrase it. Healing is important? Of course it is. I fell asleep again. 1:13 a.m. I woke to the sound of the door opening. Another nurse walked in. Different woman. Shorter. Older. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Just checking your vitals," she said cheerfully. I glanced toward the corner chair. Empty. I scanned the room. Marin wasn't there. "Did someone just leave?" I asked. The nurse frowned. "No, I just came on shift." "But the nurse—" "We rotate every 4 hours," she said, already wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "You probably dreamed it." Dreamed it? I didn't argue. Maybe I had. Anesthesia does strange things to your brain. The nurse finished up and left. The room felt colder after that. 2:02 a.m. I woke up gasping. Not from pain, from a feeling, like I'd forgotten something important. Marin was standing beside the bed, too close. Her face was inches from mine. "You were restless," she said.
"I didn't remember calling for help. I thought you left," I said. "I'm here," she replied. She adjusted my oxygen line slightly, even though it hadn't moved. Her eyes looked different. Not glowing, not unnatural, just tired. "You'll be okay," she repeated. The same exact tone as before, almost rehearsed. I noticed something else. Her scrubs didn't have a hospital logo, just plain, pale blue fabric, the kind you could buy anywhere. "You work here, right?" I asked, a small smile. "Where else would I work?" It sounded like a joke, but she didn't laugh. 3:30 a.m. The clock stopped ticking. I stared at it for a full minute before realizing the second hand wasn't moving. Marin was by the window again. "Is the clock broken?" I asked. She didn't look at it. "Time gets strange at night," she said. That sentence stayed with me. Time gets strange at night. She walked over, and without touching it, the clock started ticking again. I told myself I must have blinked and missed it. That's all. 4:45 a.m. The parking structure lights outside flickered. Not all of them, just one section. Marin was standing directly in front of the window now, blocking my view. "Are you in pain?" she asked. "No." "Are you afraid?" The question caught me off guard. Should I be? Another small pause. "No." She reached out and smoothed my hair back from my forehead. That felt too personal. Nurses are kind, gentle, professional, but this felt intimate, like she knew me. "Why do you keep saying I'll be okay?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time. "Because you need to believe it." I didn't know how to respond to that. 5:58 a.m. The sky outside began to lighten, pale gray creeping between the buildings. Marin stood at the foot of my bed. "You're almost through it," she said. "Through what?" She didn't answer. The door opened behind her. Morning shift. 2 nurses entered, chatting quietly. Marin wasn't there anymore, just gone, like she'd never been standing there at all.
The morning nurse introduced herself and began her routine. I waited until she finished. "Hey," I said casually, "is Marin still on shift?" She blinked. "Who?" "Marin. Tall, dark hair, night nurse." The nurse shook her head slowly. "We don't have a Marin on staff." "Yes, you do. She was here all night." She gave me that careful look medical professionals use when they're trying not to alarm you. "You were the only patient in this wing overnight," she said, "and only 2 nurses were assigned here. Neither of them is named Marin." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "She checked my vitals every hour."
The nurse pulled up my electronic chart on the wall monitor. There were entries at 10 p.m., then 1 a.m., then 5:30 a.m., nothing in between. "No hourly checks," she said gently. "You were stable." "What about camera footage?" I asked. She hesitated. "We don't record inside patient rooms." "Of course they don't." I asked the other night nurse when she came back later that morning. She looked genuinely confused. "I never saw anyone else go in your room," she said. "And I would have. It's right across from the station." Across from the station? I thought back. Every time Marin entered, I hadn't heard the door open or close. I stayed one more night for observation. I didn't see her again. After I was discharged, I couldn't let it go. I called the hospital a week later, asked for a staff directory. No Marin. I checked the website. No Marin. I even drove back and asked at the front desk if they'd ever had a nurse by that name. The woman searched the system. "Not in the last 10 years, she said. 10 years. I requested my full medical records, paper copies. I went through them line by line. There were notes about slight fluctuations in my heart rate around 2 a.m., but no one had charted being in the room at that time. Just the data, raw numbers. At 3:30 a.m., there was a brief gap in recorded monitor data, 37 seconds. Then it resumed. Normal. I tried to rationalize everything. Anesthesia hallucinations, sleep paralysis, a dream that felt too real. But here's the part that unsettles me most. 3 months later, I went back for a follow-up appointment. Same hospital, different floor. As I walked past a supply closet, I heard a voice inside. Soft, familiar. "You'll be okay." I froze. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Empty. Just shelves of linens and cleaning supplies. No windows, no other exit. And on one of the shelves, a small paper notepad. Plain, unmarked. I picked it up. The top page had a single line written in neat handwriting. 2:02 a.m. Restless, afraid. That was the exact time I'd woken up gasping. The exact word she'd used. Afraid. There was no signature, no name. I showed it to the nurse at the desk. She said it was probably left behind by housekeeping. I didn't argue. I just put it back. I've replayed that night in my head hundreds of times. Every detail. The way she stood by the window. The way she never wore a badge. The way the clock stopped. And started. I've asked myself the same question over and over. If she wasn't real, why do I still remember the temperature of her hands? Why do I remember the exact cadence of her voice? And why, out of everything she said, do I only clearly remember one sentence? "You'll be okay." I had another procedure last month. Different hospital, different city. I told myself it would be fine. Routine. Standard. In and out. When I woke up in recovery, there was a nurse adjusting my IV. She smiled politely. "Pain level?" she asked. 4, I said automatically. She nodded and wrote something down on a tablet. A tablet, not a notepad. Relief washed over me. I laughed a little at myself. That night, around 11:07 p.m., I woke up suddenly. The room was dark, quiet. The clock ticked softly above the door. I stared at it, waiting. Nothing happened. No one stood by the window. No one sat in the corner chair. No voice whispered reassurance. I told myself that was a good thing. That meant I'd imagined it all before. Just stress, just anesthesia, just a brain trying to make sense of a vulnerable moment. Around 2:02 a.m., I felt that same strange jolt of awareness, like I'd forgotten something important. I turned my head slowly toward the foot of the bed.
No one there. I let out a breath, closed my eyes, and that's when I heard it. Not from the doorway, not from the window, from somewhere much closer. You're almost through it. My eyes snapped open. The room was empty. Monitors steady. Door closed. Clock ticking. I didn't call for a nurse. I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. Maybe it was in my head. Maybe it always was. Because the next morning, when the day nurse came in and asked how I'd slept, I almost told her everything. I almost asked if they had a nurse named Marin. But I stopped myself. Instead, I just said, "Fine." She smiled. "Good. You're healing." Healing.
That word again. I've started to wonder if that's the part that bothers me most. Not whether she existed, not whether I hallucinated her, but the feeling that she wasn't there to monitor me. She was there to make sure I made it through something I don't remember. Because when I think back to that first surgery, there's a gap, a small one, right around 2:02 a.m., 37 seconds of missing data. And no matter how hard I try, I can't remember what happened during that time. I only remember her leaning close and asking if I was afraid. Sometimes I catch myself wondering something I don't like to say out loud. What if she wasn't there because I was healing? What if she was there because, for 37 seconds, I wasn't?